whoever's not aware of this session, this is the data superheroes talking about how to build data applications with Snowflake. We've done a lot of that work over the last few years, and I'm excited to have my other presenters with me, and I'll let Sean start off by introducing himself.
Hi there. My name is Sean Faulkner. I am head of marketing and developer relations at Skyflow and also a Snowflake data superhero. So I spent most of my career working in the data space, in particularly a lot of sensitive type of data. So I was, years ago, I worked as an academic and scientist working with organizations like the World Health Organization, National Cancer Institute, Stanford Medical School, doing analytics and visualization on a lot of really highly sensitive information. I founded a company in the HR space, so a lot of employment data, a lot of job application data. Went to Google, worked in conversational AI and design, and then all of that sort of culminated together at my job now at Skyflow. And the only kind of data that we really focus on and care about is essentially sensitive customer data, or PII. And I'll elaborate a little bit more on that when we get to talking about building applications with Snowflake as well as with Skyflow.
Hi, my name's Frank Bell. I'm with a company called Exponential now, and then I also still run my own native apps development company, IT Strategist, and Snowflake Solutions. I've been working with Snowflake since the beginning of January 2018. We've also published a book called Snowflake Essentials. I helped build out parts of the data clean rooms and the data marketplaces, and I guess I've been building apps, data apps. It dates me, but even with Access and other Oracle and others in the 90s, since probably like 1992. And when I found Snowflake, I was running a company for about 18 years. We had built all sorts of data applications for Ticketmaster, for Entrepreneur.com, Bermuda.com, all sorts of different companies. And we just found that Snowflake was really different. And so I'm excited here to talk about Snowflake applications with my co-presenters.
Hello, everyone. My name is Divyansh Saini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of this company called Houseware, which is a Snowflake native product analytics solution. We won the Snowflake Startup Challenge last year. I personally have been building on top of Snowflake for the last 5 years, different solutions in data cataloging, data governance, low-code solutions for companies which are much more digital natives, and now with Houseware building for product analytics use cases. What I'm most excited about today for all of you to join us is to learn about applications. There's a lot of focus on it in the keynote today, so excited to be joining you all and sharing what we have been learning so far.
Fantastic. I'm proud to be with these two experts in data applications. And so, hey, Houseware won the Snowflake Startup Challenge last year, 2022. Why did you decide to build your applications on Snowflake, your data application?
Yeah, so I think the good thing about Snowflake today is that it has been a solution which is not just a data warehouse. It is a solution where you have like multiple different workloads. And what customers really need is that they need use cases built on top of it. And they need use cases where the application really comes to the data, not the data moves to the application, right? So that's been core to our strategy at Houseware. We are a product analytics solution. So that means that our end users are product managers who are essentially using application data from, let's say, things like applications like OpenDoor, Strava, and a bunch of others to understand what the user behavior looks like. In a traditional world, if you think about it, right, like there's an SDK on the application which collects all the user information. Then there's somewhere where you store this data in a data storage layer, like a data lake of sorts. And then finally, you have a visual application for the product managers to really visualize this data. Now, if you think about Snowflake, the good thing is the data compute and the workload is like really in one place. So you can really do a composable analytics solution right on top of it, which is what Houseware does. And the good thing is also that you can essentially think of Snowflake as a solution which is pretty much extensible to all kinds of workloads. So Sean is here talking about security and privacy use cases. We are talking about democratization use cases in the same panel, right? So that's the best thing about it. And I'll pass it over to Frank to then tee it up to Sean.
Thanks. That was fantastic. And I know a lot of people are excited to try out Houseware. It's great to see how far you've come since last year. And Sean, you're doing a lot of different data privacy applications. How do you use Skyflow, or how do you build applications that need data privacy now?
Sure, thank you. So Skyflow is a data privacy vault company. So if the concept of the data privacy vault is new to you, essentially a data privacy vault allows you to isolate, protect, and govern access to sensitive customer data, essentially PII. As well as the key is not just storage, but how do you actually have utility over that data without sort of exposing yourself to the risk of a compliance or data breach or something like that, as well as being able to localize that data in different regions around the world to comply with things like data residency. And a lot of this works in complement to some platforms like Snowflake. So the way, a couple of different example applications that we have done with Snowflake, in particular with customers. We work with a lot of people in the digital health space that are processing very sensitive data. For example, we have a customer that is processing clinical trials data, and they don't want any of that raw clinical trials data to touch any of their infrastructure, but they need to perform machine learning over that data. So how can they do that? So the way that works with Skyflow in combination with Snowflake is essentially at the head of the ETL pipeline where the encrypted data for the clinical trials exists, whether that's an S3 bucket or SFTP server or something like that. Skyflow is essentially at the head of that ETL pipeline and is the first point of contact. So the encrypted data is going to go into Skyflow, and Skyflow is going to store and secure that information, but also essentially de-identify any of the sensitive data and give clean data on the other end where the sort of normal ETL process will get picked up. The data can be stored in Snowflake, and then they can run their machine learning and analytics loads on that in a way that they're doing it against essentially fully anonymized data. But through essentially a proprietary technology that we developed called polymorphic data encryption, we're actually able to de-identify that data in a way that still maintains the utility of the original information without essentially compromising privacy. So through a combination of privacy-preserving technologies like polymorphic data encryption and tokenization, we can essentially generate de-identified data that still has referential integrity. So as an example, under the clinical trials example here, or application, let's say that a participant in the trial, they determine is at risk of something like heart disease. And then they want to essentially contact that person to let them know that they should probably talk to their doctor. But how can they do that essentially against anonymized data? But because the produced anonymized data actually has referential integrity, they can take that de-identified data and essentially call back to their Skyflow vault through an API and say, hey, contact this person. The vault knows who that is. They know how to re-identify that person and then essentially contact the person through an email relay or text message or something like that. But you're getting full utility of the PII essentially in an anonymous way. And another example application, and I actually just wrote a blog post about this a couple of weeks ago that is published on Snowflake's Medium blog, is around data residency challenges. So how do you run global analytics on Snowflake while essentially complying with all these data residency challenges around the world? And the blog post is called One Snowflake, Multiple Vaults. And essentially the idea is that you can deploy these Skyflow vaults to any region in the world where your customers are, and essentially just take the regulated data and put it in the vault and then produce that de-identified data that you're aggregating at the Snowflake level, and then run your analytical operations against that. And because the way that we produce that information essentially is consistently generated, but anonymized, you can still run your joins and counts and all the sort of analytical operations that you need to do at the Snowflake level, but against essentially this de-identified data that takes Snowflake out of scope of data residency. And then the last one I'll touch on is around basically what everybody's talking about right now, which is generative AI and large language models. And essentially, one of the big challenges with large language models is that they essentially learn, but they don't unlearn. So once you share sensitive information with a large language model like GPT through prompting or inference or fine-tuning or however you do it, that data is essentially in the model forever. And it's not like deleting a row in a database. You basically can't take that back at that point. So the best way to prevent that from happening is essentially don't share sensitive data with the model in the first place. But how can you essentially customize models in a way that is going to help your business, but do it in a privacy-preserving way? And essentially, I just wrote a blog post that was published yesterday on Snowflake's blog about this. In particular, I focused on fine-tuning, but essentially, in that blog post and sample application, I'm storing the fine-tuning data within Snowflake. So that's essentially prompts and completions. But before I share that with the GPT for fine-tuning, I'm running that through Skyflow to essentially pull out any sensitive data. and create clean data that I then use for training. And because the clean data has that referential integrity that I talked about, when an answer goes to a user, assuming that that user has the rights to essentially see the original data, you can actually restore the plain text values to that particular person. So you're insulating the large language model from ever seeing the sensitive data, but still actually having that full utility. So you're being able to take advantage of these modern systems like GPT, large language models, while doing it in a privacy-preserving way. So those are a couple simple applications. I'm going to pass this back to Frank to continue the panel.
Thanks, John. That was amazing. Like, I'm really excited about the solutions you guys have for data residency. I abbreviated my original talk in the beginning about stuff I'd done in the background with data applications. I was just curious from the audience, how many of you have built data applications just at all, across your careers? So a few in here. And then how many of you have even heard of this Snowflake native apps before today? So not that many. So when I first found Snowflake, I wrote this article, because I do a lot of data thought leadership, just because I've been thinking about this stuff probably for too long. And then I sold my company, so I had to do something else. I wrote this thing about how the data warehouse had evolved. So if you've been around this thing for a long, long time, it's just it's gone from like small megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte to petabyte databases. And the stuff you can do now is just amazing. So I used to do neural networks and some modeling AI stuff back in like 2000 with a company called HNC. And then we did like fraud detection. It would take forever to predict these models. And it was just a real challenge. But what I've seen, and I call it data to value, this amazing movement with especially Snowflake. We are Snowflake data superheroes, so we're a little bit biased here. But I will say they've done an amazing job. Last year it was really, they bought Streamlit. And they were like, hey, we're going to revolutionize, we're going to disrupt the data application building. And that started to happen. And now we see a lot of the work they're doing with the LLMs, and with that announcement with NVIDIA yesterday, which, NVIDIA is probably one of the most exciting or, top, it's $1 trillion valuation company. So you see all these things like from different areas coming together to create a time that we've never had before. When we used to do the neural network stuff, then it was kind of like, if I think back, it was before GPUs and stuff. It was like a joke. Now it's like this, like the amount of data you can process, the speed that you can get the data, and Snowflake specifically with their micro partitioning and their data sharing, data collaboration. I've written a few articles on this. Is revolutionizing industries. What you'll see is, a lot of these different presenters, a lot of times they're going to talk about supply chain. Because of that micro partitioning technology, that is what enabled that to be able to get near real-time data without any development almost whatsoever. It's just basically sharing either from a command line or from a visual GUI. So if you're a huge company like McKesson, one of the bigger top 10, Fortune 10, as a Snowflake customer, all across that supply chain, they can now share with any partners that data. And so that was the first evolution, the data sharing, the data collaboration, and the start of Streamlit and the data applications. But what we're really talking about now is the next revolution, which is the native applications. So there's about 30 native applications that were introduced. If you're interested in how to build these with Snowflake, that's one of the things me and my team are experts in. And there's only been a few of us have started this. There's about 30 companies who released them. But think of this, it's just kind of like the beginning of the data app store, similar to like an Apple store that's going to start to come and evolve. So we're seeing Snowflake has transformed industries by making data more easily accessible, scalable. That was a big part of it, the separation of storage and compute. But now with the native applications, I don't know how many of you watched the keynote today, but they showed basically 10 different applications from 10 different 30 vendors. And they had Dash, the guy with the goggles, and he was basically rolling out. So this is what we have access to now. We can actually build within a framework a lot easier than, because I built apps in the App Store for Apple. And you can build these data applications and gain access to them within minutes. There's nothing ever been available like this, like ever. So we see this as just it's a revolutionary time of being able to get access to data with, and not just data, but the ML AI pipelines, the LLMs access, all this stuff. We just never had access to that before ever. And so what this is doing, this whole data to value pipeline that I talked about, it's basically, it's moved from being like really long, like I said, like 90s, 2000s, 2010, 2020. And we're in this like moment like never before, where it's the cycle of development and getting apps out there has never been like this. When I ran that consulting company from 1999 to 2019, and we built these apps, we'd have to hire developers. You know, we'd have front end, middle tier, back end developers. You know, sometimes you would get some unicorns that could do 2 or 3. But what this has done, especially with Streamlit, is it's basically the front end has become more of like a pattern solution. And with Snowflake, that just enables that, and it lets the data engineer have just a lot more power and a lot more speed to deliver, I call it data to value. How fast you can get those applications done, and how fast you can basically give business solutions to others. So we're running out of time here. I don't know, do you guys have any last things you wanted to add or anything?
Yeah, so I think what Frank is saying, just to put things in context, because it's not very intuitive today to build native applications on top of Snowflake, right? We only had a few hands go up, and obviously that's bound to change. But just to put things in perspective, this is probably the AWS moment for Snowflake, right? Like think about where AWS was in 2010. It wasn't very obvious that people are going to move from bare metal storage to cloud storage. And if you were the person who's going out around and saying that, hey, I'm going to be building on AWS, that was kind of your competitive advantage as an app builder, right? So this is back in 2010. Now we're in 2023. This is the same thing which is happening in the data ecosystem, where the data workloads are in one place, in one single unified store, which is Snowflake, and you are coming here as an application developer, building on top of it, distributing, monetizing your application. So yeah, just remember that it's AWS moment for Snowflake, and this is 2010, so just the beginning.
Yeah, and that reminds me, it's funny because since I've been around a long time, I saw the same thing with Salesforce when it first came out. People were like, oh, it's a small, tiny company. And just to see how Salesforce grew into this behemoth, how, like I said, the cloud computing, everybody's like, I don't know, we're never going to have that stuff. And I mean, I don't even know, it's probably like 60% of the world's data. I mean, you probably have, you know, I don't know, I'm not in the Air Force anymore. The CIA, there's all sorts of the government data on there. So it's become, like, you don't always see it when it's there, but that's what we think. We think this is another kind of data revolution. It's just this time it's Snowflake that's going to be the main probably winner of it, and hopefully its partners. So with that, I think that's the end of our session, and thank you for listening.